There's like milestone birthdays, and this is a milestone birthday. You know, turning 16 is a milestone, and having to do it during COVID, that's...
Friends, it's me, Mirab, and I welcome you back to Starspill USA. What if the Sister Wives saga, the story you've been following for over a decade, was never truly about love, faith, or even family? What if it was, in fact, a meticulously planned corporate takeover that went spectacularly wrong? For years, TLC cameras have fed us an edited tale of polygamy, a picture of heartbreak, conflict, and spiritual struggle. But behind the scenes, the truth is far darker, far more calculated, and far more revealing than anyone dared to show. The Brown family's collapse was not merely the story of a broken marriage. It was the story of a failed business empire, a house of cards built on shaky foundations of debt, manipulation, and misplaced ambition. Tonight, we uncover the 6 most shocking truths that expose the Browns for what they really were: not a family, but a failed corporation. And once you see it through this lens, every fight, every tear, and every confession looks entirely different. So before we begin, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Starspill USA, because the story you thought you knew was only the beginning. Following the final season, Christine thriving in remarriage, Janelle financially independent, and Mary finally cutting the cord. The official story has been one of personal growth, women escaping toxicity to reclaim themselves. But doesn't that sound too neat? Too polished? What about the venom in Kody's outbursts? The bizarre financial blunders, the suffocating rules, and the years of simmering resentment? These cracks weren't just personal. They were systemic. And it all begins with the most seismic revelation of all. Robyn Brown's plan was never about family. It was about empire. Robyn didn't join the Browns for love. She joined for a platform. Her marriage to Kody was not a love story, but a strategic merger. From the very beginning, her eyes were on the TLC contract, the paychecks, and the dream of turning Kody Pass into a self-sustaining lifestyle brand. The wives weren't wives. They were assets. The children weren't children. They were proof of concept. The family wasn't family. It was her business plan. My Sister Wives closet wasn't a hobby. It was the pilot project for a branded empire. She wanted to monetize the plural lifestyle, selling not just jewelry, but the dream of polygamy packaged as a marketable brand. And who better to bankroll this than TLC and the labor of 3 wives already established in the family? But there was one fatal flaw: her chosen partner. Kody Brown, instead of being her coup, the enforcer who would keep the wives compliant, Kody unraveled. He was volatile, insecure, and incapable of inspiring loyalty. His tantrums alienated the very assets Robyn needed to control. Robyn wasn't furious that he neglected Christine, Janelle, or Mary. She was furious that he failed to manage them, failed to extract compliance, and failed to enforce the vision of her empire. Their happiness was never her metric of success. Their obedience was. The collapse of My Sister Wives closet was the first crack. The wives refused to be unpaid packers and models for Robyn's failing brand. They had their own side hustles, their own ambitions, and they weren't about to be exploited. That collapse wasn't just financial. It proved that Robyn's assets had agency. And in her corporate world, an asset with agency is a liability. That is why the move to Flagstaff wasn't about fresh air or family unity. It was a relocation strategy, an attempt to isolate the wives from their friends and support networks to make them dependent on the so-called family business. One big house on Kody Pass wasn't a dream of unity. It was vertical integration, a corporate headquarters where all the assets could be monitored and managed. But it failed. The wives chose independence. Kody Pass today is nothing but an empty plot of dust, a monument to Robyn's failed empire. And the ultimate insult: the assets she dismissed are thriving. Janelle is independent, financially secure, and respected. Christine, the wife Robyn deemed expendable, has everything Robyn once wanted: love, happy blended family, and her own digital brand adored by fans. Nothing stings a failed CEO more than watching her discarded employee become her biggest competitor. Robyn dreamed of being queen. Instead, she is the Elizabeth Holmes of reality television, sitting in the ruins while Christine flourishes. This corporate lens also explains the cruelty of the later years. Those suffocating COVID rules weren't really about health. They were loyalty tests, corporate compliance policies. The nanny was allowed in because she was an employee who followed orders. Janelle and Christine's sons were branded insubordinate staff and punished with exclusion. The family became less about love, more about HR discipline. And with every new policy, the empire cracked further. But Robyn wasn't the only player in this toxic system. That brings us to our second revelation. Meri was not only a victim. At times, she was an accomplice. For decades, Meri was neglected, humiliated, and emotionally abandoned. The catfishing scandal showed us just how starved she was for affection. But in her desperation to survive, she learned a sinister skill: redirecting Kody's rage. Again and again, she subtly shifted his fury away from herself and onto Christine. The passive-aggressive remarks, the little digs, the well-timed complaints. They were tactical moves, buying her safety while throwing Christine to the wolves. Think back, the Thanksgiving seating debacle, the umbrella fight on the beach. The countless digs where Kody's eyes turned from Meri to Christine. Meri mastered triangulation. She made herself appear reasonable by positioning Christine as the problem. She did this not out of strength, but survival. Because in her own words, sometimes it's easier for me to not have Kody mad at me. That single sentence is the key. It explains the flicker of satisfaction on her face during Kody's infamous knife in the kidneys tirade. That wasn't horror. That was vindication. Meri may have been Kody's victim, but she was also his accomplice in cruelty. A woman so starved for crumbs of attention that even a shared glance of annoyance at Christine felt like intimacy. This is how toxic systems corrupt their victims. They don't just break them, they turn them against one another. And while Meri redirected the storm, Christine's body itself began to break under the weight of it all. Which brings us to our third revelation. Christine's body literally revolted against her marriage. When Christine gave birth to Truly, her labor stalled. Afterwards, her milk supply faltered. To the outside world, these were complications. But the truth is that they were biological consequences of living in a state of chronic stress. Cortisol, the stress hormone, sabotages oxytocin and prolactin, the very hormones required for childbirth and breastfeeding. Her body wasn't weak. Her body was sounding the alarm. Look at her circumstances. An older mother still grieving a previous miscarriage, forced to perform her most intimate pain in front of cameras, all while enduring the emotional torture of Kody's neglect and Robyn's sudden rise. Her marriage was collapsing. Her spirit was breaking. And her body responded by saying, "This is not a safe environment to nurture life." Christine believed her body was failing her. In reality, her body was protecting her. The stalled labor, the faltering milk supply, they were not failures. They were physical receipts of years of emotional neglect, warning signs that the human spirit can only endure so much. Truly's birth was not just the arrival of a child. It was Christine's body screaming the truth. This family was unwell, toxic to its core, and no longer sustainable. And that, friends, is the real tragedy. The Browns weren't undone by love lost. They were undone by greed, by failed strategy, and by the human body and spirit refusing to comply with a system built on exploitation. Robyn's empire collapsed. Kody's leadership failed. Meri became both victim and accomplice. Christine's body revolted, and Janelle quietly chose freedom. The Browns sold us a story of family. But what we were really watching was the rise and fall of a fraudulent empire. Rise and fall of a fraudulent empire. They were showing up in their very biology. This kind of trauma does not simply vanish when the cameras stop rolling. It lingers. It burrows into muscle memory, seeps into the nervous system, and reemerges in the smallest of tells. It alters posture, it shapes tone, it dictates which words catch in the throat. And in Meri, the decades of emotional silencing left behind one of the most heartbreaking signals of all, her nervous, misplaced laugh. For years, viewers have found it puzzling. even irritating. Why does she laugh when she should be crying? Why does she chuckle while recounting the most gut-wrenching betrayals? It appears in moments of levity, yes, but also in moments of devastation, when describing Kody's neglect, when admitting she feels invisible, when standing at the edge of tears and yet somehow letting a thin, high-pitched giggle break through instead. It is not comedy. It is not even nervousness in the ordinary sense. It is a tragic tale, the audible scar of a woman taught from girlhood that her tears were sinful. To understand the laugh, you must go back to the world that shaped her. Mary grew up in a polygamist sect steeped in the doctrine of keep sweet. To outsiders, the phrase may sound harmless, almost quaint. But within fundamentalist Mormon culture, it was a commandment. Women were instructed to remain cheerful at all times, agreeable, pleasant, and above all silent when angry or despairing. Anger was rebellion. Sadness was selfishness. Tears were weakness. A good plural wife smiled through everything her husband's neglect, her loneliness, her exhaustion, because creating harmony for the man of the house was considered holier than protecting her own well-being. This was the script Mary absorbed before she was even a teenager. Crying brought scolding. Anger was punished. A smile, however brittle, was survival. And so the little girl learnt to laugh instead of sob. The habit calcified into adulthood until it became automatic. Pain rises, laugh it away. Anguish surfaces, chuckle it down. When she recounts being abandoned, the laugh is not levity, it is armor. When she remembers her catfishing scandal, that bizarre giggle is not amusement, it is camouflage. Keep sweet. Don't cry. Don't let them see you break. But here lies the cruel irony. What once saved her now undermines her. Because when a woman laughs while describing trauma, the listener doubts the trauma itself. Audiences watch in confusion, unsure whether to pity or to scoff. Even Kody has seized on this dissonance, dismissing her feelings as exaggerated or melodramatic because they came wrapped in an incongruous chuckle. The laugh has become her undoing. The very mask that shielded her from punishment has rendered her invisible when she most needs to be seen. And every awkward giggle is, in truth, a ghost. It is the sound of the little girl Mary once was, a child told that her grief was selfish and her tears a sin. It is the sound of a woman who never learned the language of healthy pain, who was denied the right to say, "Ah, I am hurt," without being silenced. What the world hears as jarring laughter is actually the audible echo of repressed despair. A laugh so she does not sob. A chuckle so she does not scream. Yet while Mary's trauma revealed itself in sound, another sickness revealed itself in silence. The silence of financial truth. Because as the emotional cracks widened, a darker question hung in the air. How? With 3 income-generating wives gone, are Kody and Robyn still living so lavishly? This sprawling Flagstaff mansion worth nearly $1 million, the luxury SUVs, the expensive jewelry, the private school tuition, it doesn't fit. The numbers don't add up. And that leads us to the 5th truth. Kody and Robyn's empire is not an empire at all. It is a hollow performance of affluence, a house of cards built on debt and desperation. Over the years, public records and scattered on-screen clues paint a damning picture. The profits from the 4 Las Vegas home sales that should have secured the family's future vanished into the black hole of Coyote Pass, and the down payment on Robyn's mansion. The collective pot filled by TLC checks and the endless hustle of Janelle, Christine, and Mary through multi-level marketing ventures slowly became Kody and Robyn's private fund. The wives who generated the wealth found themselves renting or scrambling for loans in Flagstaff, while Robyn was installed in luxury. And still, the expenses mount. The TLC income, once divided and taxed, cannot sustain their lifestyle. That leaves one explanation: loans. Enormous ones. Property leverage to the hilt. Credit cards and lines of equity stretched thin. Financial juggling worthy of the Real Housewives, with whispers of tax maneuvers, suspicious educational vouchers. And Kody possibly profiting quietly as the upline from his wife's MLM sales. They are not living off savings. They are not living off investment. They are living off borrowed time, borrowed money, and the fragile hope that TLC will keep renewing contracts. Their empire is an illusion, and when the cameras stop, the crash will be brutal. Bankruptcy is not a risk. It is a looming inevitability. And here again lies the most delicious irony. The wives Kody treated as burdens, the ones he belittled and discarded, are the very ones thriving now. Christine, shrewd and independent, sold her house at a profit and built her own brand. Janelle, practical as ever, invests smartly and secures her independence. Even Mary, long dismissed, stands on firmer ground with her in and her online sales than Kody and Robin do. The patriarch and his queen sit in a mansion that may soon slip from their grasp, while the so-called rebellious wives quietly prosper. It is not difficult to imagine the karmic end, Robin, the self-proclaimed architect of their empire, forced to sell her mansion, perhaps even renting a modest home owned by Christine, the rival she once saw as expendable. The failed CEO reduced to paying rent to her star employee, a fitting, almost Shakespearean finale. And yet, even beneath all of this, one more truth remains. A truth about Kody himself, about who he really valued, and about the one wife who may have been his truest partner all along. For the cameras sold us a love story with Robin, but the evidence tells a different tale. If you look past the theatrics, past the staged passion and public declarations, the wife who stood as Kody's equal, his peer, perhaps even his quiet favorite, was not Robin at all. It was Janelle. At all. It was Janelle. It wasn't simply the collapse of a marriage. It was the implosion of a carefully crafted plan built on power, manipulation, and money. For more than a decade, the Brown family story was packaged and sold to us as a tale of faith, love, and plural marriage. But when you peel back the layers, what you find isn't romance, it's strategy. It isn't harmony, it's hierarchy. And it certainly isn't unity. It's a crumbling empire built on debt and denial. The Browns weren't just a family on television, they became a brand. TLC turned their lives into a long-running series. But behind the scenes, the family itself became a corporation. The wives were not just partners, they were employees, tasked with generating income and holding up the facade of unity. Their struggles, heartbreaks, and even their traumas were converted into episodes, season arcs, and ratings. And when the wives finally woke up, realized their worth, and began walking away, the whole corporate structure began to collapse like a house of cards. Let's break this down. Truth 1. Robin's corporate takeover. When Robin entered the family, the timing was suspiciously perfect. The Browns were already negotiating with TLC, and the show needed a twist. Robin became that twist, younger, fresh, and with a ready-made backstory as a single mom. But what looked like romance was, in many ways, a business merger. From her very first major act insisting on a designer wedding dress the family could barely afford, Robin positioned herself not as a team player but as a CEO taking over operations. Later, when the My Sister Wife's Closet business launched, it was clear she didn't want a family venture. She wanted control. Branding, vision, leadership, these were her buzzwords. And the other wives, they were meant to fall in line. Truth 2. Mary the accomplice, Mary, long seen as isolated, developed survival tactics of her own. One of the most revealing examples was the infamous tree dispute at Coyote Pass. It wasn't about trees. It was about attention. Mary knew that Kody thrived on conflict, and by stepping into the spotlight, she could force him to engage with her, if only for a moment. When his anger boiled over, it often redirected onto Christine or Janelle. In that way, Mary avoided being the sole target, but at the cost of deep resentment from her sister wives. She wasn't just surviving, she was helping Kody's power games to continue. Truth 3. Christine's body kept the score. Christine's trauma was etched into her very biology. During the birth of her daughter, Truly, her labor stalled, not by accident, but because her body recognized the environment as unsafe. Cameras in the room, Kody's neglect, years of loneliness, her system simply shut down. Later, when Truly's illness struck, Christine finally faced what her body had long been warning her. Staying with Kody wasn't just soul-destroying, it was dangerous. That realization became her turning point. Her decision to leave wasn't impulsive. It was survival. Truth for Mary's tragic laugh for Mary. The most haunting tell was her nervous laugh. Time and again, viewers saw it. A giggle at the worst possible moment. Why? Because Mary was raised under the doctrine of keep sweet. In her world, anger was rebellion, sadness was selfishness, and crying was weakness. She learned to mask tears with a laugh, even when her heart was breaking. That laugh wasn't humor, it was armor. But it backfired. Audiences found it confusing, and Kody used it to dismiss her pain, accusing her of being dramatic or insincere. In reality, her laugh was the sound of repression, the echo of a lifetime of silencing. Truth 5. The financial illusion. Then there's the money. The Las Vegas homes should have set them up for life. Instead, the profits vanished, swallowed by Coyote Pass, new mortgages, and Robin's nearly $1 million mansion. Public records show loans stacked upon loans, debts upon debts. The monthly bills, cars, private schools, luxury living far outweighed their TLC income. Kody and Robin weren't living off savings or investments. They were living off credit. And when Christine, Janelle, and even Mary left, Kody lost not just wives but major income streams. Their MLM ventures had funneled money upwards, with Kody quietly benefiting. Once they walked away, that stream dried up. The empire wasn't an empire at all. It was a castle built on sand. Truth 6. Janelle, the real partner, and then there was Janelle. For years, she was the quiet force, the strategist, the one who actually knew how to manage finances, logistics, and planning. With her, Kody had something closer to an equal partnership. They spoke like co-founders of a company rather than husband and wife. But when Janelle realized that Kody had abandoned not just her, but their children, she made her move. Her exit wasn't emotional. It was rational. She laid out the facts, presented her case, and walked. It was less a breakup than a boardroom decision. Dissolve the partnership. Walk away with her share and reinvest in her own family. And so the truth is undeniable. The Sister Wives saga was never really about plural love or religious faith. It was about power, profit, and control. Robin's takeover, Mary's survival tactics, Christine's awakening, Janelle's partnership, each step tells the story of a corporation falling apart. And now Kody and Robin are left clinging to a mansion they can't afford. Weighed down by debt, desperately hoping the cameras keep rolling. The wives Kody once dismissed as weak have moved on and thrived, while he and Robin face a financial reckoning. The irony couldn't be more poetic. Friends, this is not just a family drama. It's a cautionary tale about power, control, and what happens when you build an empire on the backs of women you refuse to value. And as always, I'm Mirab. And you've been watching Starspill USA, your home for the deepest dives and boldest truths about the Sister Wives saga. Stay tuned because the story isn't finished yet. The story isn't finished yet.